When did you first start noticing like craft beer popping off everywhere?
The late '80s, because that's when breweries were popping up everywhere. Um, you were getting a lot of beers from every state didn't have a huge amount of breweries like they do today, so you would get beers from all over the country coming into Michigan. There are beer stores. If you go to a good beer store at the time, you'd find beers from Oregon, California, Maine, New York, all over. Well, one of the things that kind of disappointed me is that craft beers pushed a lot of imports off the shelf. I guess they feel there's only so much shelf space, and so craft beer pushed the imports out. Well, then when Michigan was getting more, and not just Michigan, but other states were getting more and more breweries, the beers from other states were getting pushed out because now all of a sudden you had a lot of local beer that people were interested in. So back in the '80s or late '80s, that's when you noticed a lot of craft beer, and there were more specialty shops converting to some shelf space to craft beer. Usually, it was different kinds of wine and things like that. And but then they started making room for beer, and then there's places that specialized in beer. And right now, if you're looking for a beer, now you might not find it at your favorite store, but if you hunt around, you'll find it. I notice in my rotation, I have a store rotation because not every store carries everything. I mean, there's a lot of product. So even a Total Wine, which I like going to, they don't carry everything. So there's a couple beer stores near me that they'll carry stuff that Total Wine won't carry. Total Wine will not carry tiny some tiny breweries maybe got some local distribution deal to put their beer in that shop, and there won't be at Total Wine, but it'll be there. There's just like one place I go to, they don't carry much. Like I love Sierra Nevada, but they don't carry much. They carry the big name, but like they don't have the Centennial Ale, which is their holiday IPA. They don't have the barley wine. They don't have the Narwhal, which is their imperial stout. But they'll have other stuff that I don't see at Total Wine. Like they had what was it? Yeah, they had CBS. It's CBS is called, well, originally it was called Canadian Breakfast Stout. It's a variant of KBS, which is originally Kentucky Breakfast Stout. And what they have what's called the Breakfast Stout, which is their imperial stout. They age it in bourbon barrels, hence they gave it the Kentucky Breakfast Stout name. And then the Kentucky Breakfast Stout is KBS with maple syrup added to the brew. So it gave them the Canadian Breakfast Stout. But they don't put those names on, they just call it KBS and CBS. Well, they had a 4-pack of CBS there, a couple 4-packs. Total Wine wasn't carrying that. And then they have 2 bottles of Sam Adams Utopia, which is 30% alcohol beer. Pump it out once a year. But I asked him, I know it's ridiculously expensive, and I told him, so you're selling this for $250? He said, no, he's selling it for $330. It's like a half liter of beer. And I thought, man, it's too rich for my taste. So those 2 bottles are still there, but it's been like 3 weeks. I don't know who's going to buy it.
Maybe a beer testing episode for you, that like 100th episode or something like that. You never know.
I did a review of a Sam Adams, a triple bock from 1994. What a marvelous beer. I mean, 31 years old, and it still was very, very good. I was shocked how good it was, because I was reading online about aging them, and they said that beer could, if it doesn't age right, it's really poor. But it aged right, so.
How do you age a beer?
Well, a lot of people are now aging them in refrigerators. And a lot of beer you shouldn't age. I've had beers I've aged like 20 years plus, and they're not drinkable. Unfortunately, I made big mistakes on some of that. So I'll age beers now 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 or 5, but nothing that old. My fridge, I've got 4 beers from the 20 teens. So I'm going to do reviews on them. I'm not sure how any of them are, but I'll still do a review. You know, if it's a sink pour, it's a sink pour.